weekend during June from 5 to 6. We will do some meditation together and then have question and answer period. So I was thinking what to lead. You know, we have basically 7 sessions to spend together of about an hour each, a little more. So I was kind of thinking how to structure the sessions. And I hope all of you have been watching, joining His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, online. So I guess I should say, first of all, everything, I don't really know much. I mean, I've been a monk since 2001 and studying at Serapje Monastery since 2004. But still, compared to my own teachers, His Holiness Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche and other Lama Lundu, Ken Rinpoche, Lama Lundu of Kopan Monastery, I really don't know very much. I don't have much experience of the Buddhist path. But, you know, due to their kindness, I've received lots of good teachings. And due to their blessing and the blessing of Shakyamuni Buddha and Nagarjuna and all the great Buddhist masters of the past, so I request their help in guiding me each day, and especially, whenever I'm trying to help others, because I really don't know how to help others very much. But definitely the Buddhist teachings have been beneficial to me immensely over the years. So I hope, it can be the same for you all. So, so I hope you all have been joining His Holiness Dalai Lama online recently. So I was thinking to structure what we do together based on His Holiness advice. So like His Holiness this morning had a session with young people from Southeast Asia, and he emphasized beginning with meditating on the clarity of the mind. So I thought that's where we'll start today. It's meditating on the clarity of the mind, which is a kind of placement meditation. And then His Holiness always emphasizes trying to generate more compassion. So we'll meditate, we'll spend some time after that. Not today, but in the future sessions, meditating on compassion in some different ways. And then His Holiness will often encourage us to think about emptiness. It's one thing he spoke about this morning also, is contemplating emptiness and dependent arising. So then, I think we'll work towards doing that towards some of the later sessions of June. Okay, so let's start with, whenever we're doing meditation, basically there's, let's say five main things to include in any meditation session. So the first is, of course, getting comfortable in your posture, in wherever you're sitting to meditate. So I hope when you all join, it can be a little bit of a trick to have your laptop and electrical supply and everything right by your meditation cushion. Is something we're not used to doing. Usually we sit at our desk where we work with our laptop, but now you need to bring the laptop to the place where you meditate, or bring your meditation to the place where you work, one or the other. So have them together. So you sit on a cushion that's comfortable, either in a chair or on the floor on a cushion. And then since we don't have so much time, I won't go in detail about the posture, but basically we want to sit in a way that we can just relax our body without having to pay attention to our body during the course of the meditation session. So we want to be balanced. I'm sitting up straight. If you're sitting on the floor, then of course sit cross-legged. If you're sitting in a chair, make sure you're not slouching down, but you're sitting up straight. So it can help to put a small cushion under just the back of your butt, right, to help you stay up straight. So we want to make sure we're not falling forward or falling back or falling left or right, but we're erect and balanced. And then make sure also we're not clenching our muscles or holding our body very tight in any way. But by finding a place where we're balanced, then we can relax. So the spine should be straight and firmly kind of have firm support under the base of the spine. And then let your shoulders be broad, open. Rest your hands in your lap So typically we rest the hands, the right hand on top of the left, like this, in the lap. Just rest it on your lap, right in front of your belly button. Take a few deep breaths, just to see that your lungs are open. You want to make sure you're not restricting your breathing in any way by having like a tight belt or something. And then slightly tuck your chin, right? And elongate the back of your neck to kind of put your head in a more stable position. Imagine there's like a straight line from the very crown of your head right down to the bottom of your spine. And then let your eyes fall. Just relax the muscles around your eyes. So your eyelids naturally just kind of close a little bit. And then turn your gaze down at about a 45-degree angle. And yeah, so in this tradition, we just breathe naturally. Don't force your breath to be long or short or deep or shallow or something. Just breathe in a way that's naturally, primarily breathe through the nose. Usually it's recommended to keep the tip of your tongue just gently touched, pressed against the roof of your mouth, just behind your front teeth, in order to prevent your mouth from drying out. And to assist with just a smooth flow of the energy in the body. It's supposed to help that also. So breathe naturally. And with your eyes, don't focus on looking at anything, right? Kind of pull the focus of your vision back a little bit. So it just rests, your vision rests unfocused in space between your eyes and the floor, the table, or whatever's in front of you. Right? And then, so as you feel comfortable in your physical posture, then turn your attention towards your mind. So just as His Holiness emphasized this morning session, meditation is something we do. He was calling the sixth consciousness. So another name, that's a common term used in Tibetan, Namche Chukwa, the sixth consciousness. But a more common label in English is the mental consciousness. So His Holiness was making that point. When we meditate, we're not, and when we're thinking as well, we're not using our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, or our body, or the sense consciousness associated with those, but we're using the sixth kind of consciousness, our mental consciousness, right? So we're not using the five sense consciousness, rather we're using the mental consciousness. So as you relax in your physical posture, then try to take your attention away from the five sense consciousness. Don't try to let go of paying attention to things that you see, or things you hear, or things that you smell, taste, or feel with your body. And turn your attention towards your mind itself, the mental consciousness. Okay, so I was saying there's in any meditation session, so yeah, I have to talk a little bit at first. Usually when we meditate, if we're listening to me talking, then you can't really meditate effectively at the same time. But there's some things I have to say, right, at the beginning. So the first, I was saying there's 5 steps in any meditation session, which is first, we get comfortable in the posture, right? Then we focus our mind. Then, and do some placement meditation. Then we generate a positive motivation. Then the main part of the session, and then we dedicate at the end, right? Teresa, can you hear okay? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so.
Yeah, we can.
That's the
We can
posture.
hear you.
So I think you're all probably feeling comfortable in your posture. I can't see you all, but I imagine.
People can switch on the videos also. It's okay.
Yeah.
Video can be on.
Okay, so then the second part, to focus our mind, why don't we, maybe it's easier, we just focus on the breath, right? So just observe the entire process of breathing. Just breathe naturally and decide, in your mind, generate the intention. say for the next 2 minutes, then I'll focus on, I'll just simply observe my breath to the best of my ability. And when I see my mind wandering off to think about something else, think about the past or the future, or generate some other kind of thoughts, I'll recognize that as a distraction and bring my attention back to simply observing the breath. Right? So why don't we just practice like that for 2 minutes, just watching the breath. So then, so there's the posture, generating some mental focus, and then the motivation. So then the motivation is just thinking about why are we doing this activity? So I know many of you are already familiar with Buddhism, so especially the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism, of the Bodhisattva Yana. So, I mean, typically in the Sanskrit tradition, the Bodhisattva presentation of the Bodhisattva path of Buddhism, then the highest motivation is bodhicitta, right? The aspiration to become fully enlightened in order to benefit all sentient beings, right? So if one knows about and is comfortable with that motivation, of course, that's the best. But even if one doesn't know about that, just to aspire simply, well, to use one's life to be a benefit to oneself and others, right? So the main thing is have a positive motivation. So it can take many different forms, but essentially we want to recognize that, ourself, we want happiness in the same way all other sentient beings, our family, our friends, strangers, and even people we tend to dislike, they all are the same as us, wanting happiness. So that's one reason to do anything we're doing in our life, is to bring about the welfare and happiness of ourselves and others. And then another reason is that because just as we want to be free from dissatisfaction, misery, unhappiness, then all the other sentient beings, again, those we're close to, our family and friends, those who are more distant from, who we don't know, strangers, and even people we tend to dislike, they're the same as us in having problems, dissatisfaction, suffering, and wanting to be free from that. So we can generate those two things as a motivation. Loving kindness, wishing for ourselves and all of the sentient beings to have happiness and well-being, and compassion, wishing for ourselves and all of the sentient beings to be free from every form of suffering as a motivation. So maybe spend a minute or so reflecting on those two as a reason or aspiration, thinking that whatever I do here in this session, may it all become a cause for the well-being and happiness of myself and others, and become a cause for myself and others to be free from every form of suffering. Okay, so that's the motivation. So again, the steps in a meditation session are the getting comfortable in a meditation posture, then focusing your mind, doing some placement meditation, and then motivation. But those two steps, you can actually, the order is not certain, right? You can do the motivation first, and then do some placement meditation, focus the mind afterwards, or the other way. So the order is not important there. So now the main part of the meditation session. Yeah, so this session, we'll, let's look at the clear knowing nature of the mind, as His Holiness recommended this morning. Looking at the nature of the mind, yeah, it's called the conventional nature of the mind. His Holiness said the clear nature of the mind, but actually, so in Buddhism, when we talk about mind or consciousness or awareness, we're talking about the same thing. There's three words for the same thing. So fundamentally, you know, it's the fact that we have a mind that makes us different from inanimate things, like, you know, like say a mannequin. You know, a mannequin is like made of plastic or wood or something. It has the same shape and color as a human body, but because there's no consciousness, then it's not a person. Or, you know, inanimate things like a table or a computer. Even like a computer, it can perform many complex functions, you know, multiplication, and run different programs. But the computer, because it doesn't have a mind, it doesn't have awareness, it's not aware of what it's doing, right? It can't create things. It cannot be creative. It cannot you know, tell us how it feels. It can't have like original conversation. And it relies on somebody else feeding it the program. So even something, obviously something simple like wood or rocks or chairs, they're not aware when something is touching them, or they can't see or feel or hear. But even something like a computer, which can, it's hardware, can pick up sounds, receive input, give outputs, run programs and things. But the computer doesn't have consciousness, so it's not aware of what's going on. So it's helpful to look at things which don't have consciousness, in order that when we look at ourselves, we realize what's different. What does it mean to have a mind, right? To have awareness, to have consciousness. So the definition of the mind is that which is clear and knowing, right? That which is clear and knowing. So the clarity of the mind is simply that there's no, well, on one hand, there's nothing fixed in our perception. There's no thought. Well, why don't we just point as a question? We can meditate on this as a question. So, but yeah, let's say like this. The clarity of the mind is that the fact that there's no thought or perception, there's no visual perception, or there's no perception of a sound, there's no memory, there's no thinking about the future that's fixed in the space of our mind, right? But rather, there's different thoughts arise and pass away. There's different perceptions that arise, in the space of our mind, and then pass away. So when we look at the clarity of the mind, we want to observe that. We can ask the question, is there any, we can see that now I'm aware, I'm conscious. I feel things, I hear things, I see things, I think things, different thoughts arise. But we can ask the question, are any of those perceptions fixed in that they're always present, right? So as we look, we can see that no, they're not. They all arise and pass away. And yet there's this underlying continuity of awareness that moves from one moment to the next. And it's like it supports or provides the possibility of newly becoming aware of other things in each moment, right? So when we look at the clarity of the mind and the knowing nature of the mind, we want to, instead of looking at like the different perceptions arising moment by moment, we want to direct our attention to that underlying stream of awareness, which is always present, right? So it's kind of like, when we look at the ocean, or say we look at a river, like the Brahmaputra. In Assam, you can go to the bank of the Brahmaputra River and look at the river. So there's two ways to look at it. One, you can just look at the ripples and the kind of patterns on the surface, but they're changing all the time. Right? Or you can look below the surface. Maybe with your eyes you can't see unless you jump in the water, which is very dangerous in the Brahmaputra. But in the ocean, or a lake, you can imagine though, what's below the surface. Below the surface, the water is just continually water, right? Maybe a lake, a river, ocean or a lake is a better example because the water is not moving so much. But so just like we can either look at the patterns of the wave on the surface, or we can look down beneath the water, beneath the surface, where the continuity is much more the same, right? It's the same stuff, there's just water there. And then it arises in different shapes and different kinds of waves on the surface. So like that with our mind, in order to meditate on the clear and knowing nature of the mind, we ask this question, is there any perception that's fixed and always present in my awareness? Or is it rather that there's different perceptions arise and pass away with each moment, right? And then direct our attention to the continuity of sameness, the nature of the mind that is the same and consistent from moment to moment, which is merely this clear knowing nature, right? So the clarity of the mind is the fact that any object, anything that exists can appear in the space of the mind, right? And there's no perception that's fixed. So spend a few moments now. We'll take a few minutes. I'll stop talking, and then just try to practice in that way. Right. So ask yourself this question: is there any perception fixed that's always present? Is there any thought that's always present, or any feeling that's always present? Any perception of something I hear, or physically something I feel that's always present in the mind, right? Mhm. So another helpful analogy for the nature of the mind is the sky. right? Or space. So think just like space, it's like the space in the sky. It's like a medium. That provides the possibility for things to pass through it, right? So think how, birds fly through the space of the sky, clouds, they're continually moving through the space of the sky. Airplanes can pass through the sky. The light, of the sun and the moon, it moves through the space of the sky. So all these different things, they move through the space of the sky, or smoke, or dust. All these different things, they can move through the space of the sky, but none of them are the nature of the sky, right? The sky's potential, it's like, it's being free of obscuration. It's being free from being obscured in an inherent way by clouds. Although clouds may cover the sky some days and it's completely cloudy, but the clouds are not of the nature of the sky. So eventually they can pass away. Or birds or locusts or other things, they move through the space of the sky, but none of them are always present, right? So that the sky's, its nature is just to be clear of anything, free from anything. So that's kind of like the clarity of the mind is the same way. The mind, it's not different, again, different thoughts, feelings. Sometimes we feel happy, sometimes we feel sad, sometimes we're excited, sometimes we're bored. Sometimes we're thinking a lot of things, and sometimes we're just can't think of anything. But none of those kinds of experiences are of the nature of the mind. So those are like waves on the surface of the ocean. And again, we want to turn our attention down deeper below those perceptions to see what is, so just like when we look at the sky, to get a sense of the space of the sky, we look at all the different things moving through it, the clouds and the light and dust and the birds and the airplanes. But instead of focusing on those things, we focus on the mere possibility of movement, for all those things to arise and then pass away, arise and pass away. That the sky provides that possibility, right? So the sky is like this space that provides a possibility for things to move, things to arise and pass away in the space of the sky. So so check to see, can you see how is your mind like that? That what's the same from moment to moment of our mind is it provides this kind of space to have perception, right? To be aware of things. And that the kinds of things we're aware of, they change all the time. So take a few minutes and try to use that analogy of the sky. And then relate it back to your mind, right? The nature, to see how the nature of the mind is clear and known. So one final thing to think about how this, so as so now it's Sunday, right? It'll be another 6 days. Next Saturday, maybe we'll meet again. But you can maybe practice working on during the week which is helpful about this meditation is, look at all so especially when we're experiencing hardship, anxiety, worry, fears about the future. It can help immensely to look at our mind, look at the mind, instead of looking at the thoughts that are, we're thinking about the future and worrying, or looking at other people and worrying about them, feeling anxiety, fear. So it can help to look at all those thoughts and the feelings, disturbing feelings that go with them. And then look, instead of looking at how those things arise and pass away, and look deeper at the nature of the mind, and look at how the nature of our mind is just the same. All those worries and fears, they're like angry storm clouds, like big swirling black storm clouds, and maybe even lightning and thunder in the sky. But if we can remember, like just as when we see storm clouds and lightning and thunder, that's not the nature of the sky. Those things are arising due to causes and conditions. They exist, but eventually the storm will pass and the sun will come out again, right? So just like that, when you see these disturbing thoughts and emotions, anxiety, fear, worry, arise in our mind, it can help a lot just to, sit down quietly, just like we're doing now, and look at, the nature of the mind, which has, existed. This clarity and knowing nature of the mind existed before this disturbing, anxiety and fear arose. Even in the very present moment, as we feel anxious and afraid or worried, we can separate to see, oh, I am not that fear. I'm not that anxiety. That's just something arising in my mind. I am more like this clear knowing nature. So look at the clear knowing nature below the surface. Just like if we're in a rough, in a very rough ocean, full of rough ocean waves that are beating us around, but then we dive down below the surface, we find stillness in the water. So like that, by becoming familiar with this clear knowing nature of the mind, then whatever troubling thoughts or feelings are arising, we can learn to look below the surface and look at, oh, the nature of our mind is still there. It was there before, it's there now in the present moment. Eventually all these disturbing thoughts and feelings will pass, and that my pure nature, the pure nature of my mind, which is more related to the pure nature of myself as a person, that will be there in the future. Not only for me, for others as well. Okay? So try to just take a couple minutes and try to look at that aspect as well. When all these disturbing thoughts, anxiety, fear is arising, I am not that stress. I'm not that anxiety. I'm not those disturbing thoughts. They're not me. They're just like ripples on the surface, waves on the surface of the water. So I'm more closely related to this clear knowing nature of the mind, which is there before, is there now, is there, will be there in the future. So we can kind of take refuge in that nature. Right? So take a couple of minutes and try to, for whatever way makes sense to yourself, try to get some experience. Think about that aspect. Okay, so we should pause there. Already a lot of time has passed. We don't have so much time left. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you have any questions, we have another, we can go for another 15, 20 minutes if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Farisa, you should put me on spotlight me, I think. On speaker view, it's spotlighting you.
Speaker view.
Yeah. Anyway,
You want on the grid?
well, I'm looking at the grid, but it's anyway, we can figure out later.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, can you just you can unmute yourself and then ask questions. Hello, Amelia. Hi. You can
I
unmute
also,
yourself.
if you click on the participants and then
Yeah.
at the bottom of that, there's a raise hand button. You
Yeah.
can raise your
Anybody who has any questions can ask and unmute yourself.
hand.
Any questions?
Chunky, you must have a question.
Can you unmute yourself?
Otherwise, you're going to have to ask a question, Teresa. It'll be your responsibility as the host.
So I just want to ask you about when we were doing a meditation on the clear, and how do you know it is clear? So what is the technique will you use to understand that it is clear?
Well,
How will you know? Because when you, as a beginner, you will how will you identify that the mind is clear?
okay. Farisa, in the chat, Bhaskar is saying you have to unmute everyone.
Oh, really?
You have everyone muted.
Oh, okay, okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. I've unmuted everybody. Is it okay now to talk? Yeah, you can talk now. I'm going to unmute everyone.
Yes.
So if you can answer that question, Legtsok.
I'm muted now. Okay. I was saying, yeah, to see the clear nature of the mind, you look at how any object can appear to the mind. Like when we can look at anything. We can look at a red door, or we can look at the desk. We can look up at the ceiling. We can look down at the floor, and whichever direction we look, all the different objects in our field of vision, they can appear to the mind, to our mind. But none of those objects is always present in our awareness. Perception of what's on the right appears, and then we look to the left and that disappears, and then what's on the left appears. Or with sounds, different sounds appear to our mind. As people speak, we hear different words, different sounds, but none of the perception of any of those sounds, none of those is fixed. They're in our awareness. It's not like we hear the same sound continually. Rather, we hear a sound, and then the perception of that passes away. Then we hear another sound, and it passes away. So, and then with our thoughts, it's the same. We think about one thing, and then we can change, our attention. We think about something else. Different thoughts arise and pass away, right? So from that, we can see that none of our perceptions is fixed. None of the objects we perceive is fixed in the space of our mind, but rather our mind is like the space of the sky, in which different things arise and then they pass away. Other things arise and pass away. So just looking at that, in the present moment, how different perceptions arise and pass away, but yet there's this continual possibility always for perceiving something new. Then that shows us the clarity of the moment. Another example, which I didn't mention, is like a mirror. If you have a mirror, a big mirror on your wall in your house, is there any reflection that's always in the mirror? That's fixed? That's always no, like whatever comes in front of the mirror is reflected in the mirror, but none of those reflections is always fixed in the mirror. not like a painting. Like a painting on your wall, it's not clear, right? Because there's always the same, the colors and shapes are fixed in the painting. But the mirror is like, it's clear that anything, can be reflected in. So our mind is like that. Whatever however we direct our attention, anything can appear. Sounds or shapes and colors or physical sensations of hot and cold or different thoughts and feelings.
So it's like a glass,
Uh,
or like a mirror.
like a mirror, yeah. Yeah. All right, I hear someone.
Yeah. Vijay Lakshmi, you want to ask something?
You can turn your videos on too, no? People.
Yeah, you can turn your videos on.
They're all hiding in the dark.
Another question I wanted to ask you is that what happens when your the emotions like a fear or anxiety is more, it's so much that it overwhelms your seeing the mind as clear.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was thinking, it's kind of like, well, imagine you have a small child, like you're living with a small child, your own child or a niece or nephew or someone, and then suddenly a big storm comes, like with black clouds. Say in the afternoon, the sun is shining, but then suddenly big black storm clouds come, and then there's lightning and thunder and there's rain pouring down, and the child gets very afraid. They think, oh no, we're going to be hurt. They kind of panic and something happens. So how would you soothe the child? You remind them, oh, the storm it won't last for long. It was sunny before. Now the storm is here, but we won't get hurt. And then the storm will pass and the sun will come out again later on. So when we're overcome with anxiety and fear and fear and worry, it's kind of like we're panicking in relation to these disturbing thoughts and worries about the future, worrying about things happening, and we kind of panic in that situation. I mean, we forget about there was a time before that when those kind of thoughts and fears hadn't arisen, and there'll be a time after that when those worries have passed. That time will come eventually. And so, and how do we know that time will come? Because again, we look at the nature of the mind, how there's clear knowing nature of the mind that existed before, it exists now, even during the time of anxiety and fear. And then, it will exist in the future. Just like the pandemic, the coronavirus. I mean, it didn't exist 6 months ago. None of us ever heard of that. Maybe it didn't exist. Now it's kind of, it's enveloped. Fear and worry about that has enveloped the whole world. I mean, and for good reason. We don't want to get sick. We don't want other people to get sick. But, think, 4 years from now, 3-4 years from now, a vaccine will have come out. We'll all have been vaccinated. Nobody will be sick anymore with that. And then it'll be just a memory. The economy will be kind of rolling again. It'll be just a memory, right? So to think of that, to think of that can help the past and future, but especially to think how there's a continuity of experience, which that continuity, it's going to keep flowing, and these worries and fears, they're just temporarily present, but eventually they will also kind of go away. So just recognizing that can help reduce anxiety and fear in the moment.
Anybody wants to ask questions?
I would like to ask a question.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Tenzin Legtsok. I will directly go to my question.
Sure.
So my question is, this meditation we did right now, is it different from Shamta meditation? And if it is different, the objective as well as this is different.
If it's different than the what? Objective?
Objective, we want, is it different?
Can you repeat the last part? I couldn't hear the last part of your question.
The objective of doing this meditation and doing Shamta meditation, is it different?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. So this meditation we're just doing, well, it's not just shamatha meditation, because shamatha meditation, like His Holiness mentioned this morning, shamatha meditation is, you can call it like, I think His Holiness called like single pointed concentration, but you can also call placement meditation, because in shamatha meditation, you're simply you choose an object of meditation, like the breath, or like His Holiness recommended, the clear knowing nature of the mind. And then you simply focus your attention on that. And then you don't think about anything. You just try to keep your attention on that object and generate stability where your attention is unwavering. It's continually directed at the object, and clarity, where you have a very vivid perception. But when you do shamatha meditation, when you start thinking about things, that's a distraction, right? So you don't want to think about anything, except at the beginning you think, now I'm going to focus my attention on this object. And then you don't get caught up in any more discursive thought. You simply observe the object. Yeah. Whereas, so when we're doing this, I mean, the clear knowing nature of the mind, it can be an object of shamatha meditation. But if you don't understand what it is, you haven't clearly identified it first, then you won't know what you're focusing on. So the way we were just meditating now, I was spending more time just explaining and trying to give examples for what the clear knowing nature of the mind is. So in order to identify the nature of our mind, it requires discursive thought. We have to analyze, we have to think about these different analogies, think about the definition, and look at our own experience. So it's more like a vipassana meditation, where it's an analytical meditation, where we're trying to understand what the clear knowing nature of the mind is. But in this case, just like His Holiness recommended this morning, as we get more clear an idea about what the nature of our mind is, then, and we have some experience of it, then we can spend more and more time during the meditation just focusing on that, right? So when we feel like we have a sense of what the nature of the mind is, then we can stop thinking about and just try to focus on experiencing that for a time. And then when another question arises, again, we think about, and then again, we come to some insight and focus on. So we're kind of combining shamatha and vipassana, or placement meditation and analytical meditation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Amelia has some questions. You've raised a hand.
Venerable, when you say to stay present, are you talking about to be aware, to just being aware of aware, if you were listening to a sound, you're aware, or if you have thoughts coming to your mind, you're aware? Is this the staying present? Is this the meaning?
Yes, basically. Staying present, yeah, means to be aware. And generally, I mean, we can be aware. There's different ways to be aware, right, of something. So, I mean, what I think you're talking about more is like in the present moment, just being aware of whatever appears to our mind, right? So that's one way of, using our awareness. But we can also use in a more focused way by like choosing an object that we want to focus our attention on, right? For example, our breath. If we decide, we can choose that, oh, for the next 10 minutes or an hour, I'm going to focus on my breath. I'm being fully aware of my breath, right? So in that case, we're not just trying to be aware of whatever arises. Rather, we're trying to let go of all other perceptions, except the perception of our breath, right? So it's a more focused kind of awareness. And then, when we do analytical meditation, more like what we were just doing, we can address a set of questions. For example, the first question I asked you to think about was, is it true that that all different perceptions arise and pass away in the space of our awareness, and none of them are fixed, no? So then we look at our experience with this question in mind, and we kind of ask ourselves, well, is it true that I see things, but I see different things, and those different perceptions arise and pass away. I hear different sounds. The experience of those sounds arises and pass away. I have different thoughts and feelings, but they all arise and pass away. Is there any of those that's fixed in my awareness? So in that case, our awareness is focused not just on a fixed object like our breath or mind, but our awareness is kind of directed towards this set of questions and then our own answers to those questions. Right?
Thank you.
Sure.
There's a question from B. How do I know you can unmute yourself, B.
No microphone or camera.
Okay, I'll just read out the question from B. How do I know I'm aware of the underlying mind and how exactly to do that? My awareness seems to be just an object of awareness. I have no microphone or camera on my computer. All right. Okay. All right.
Okay,
Yeah.
B.
Did you get the question?
First of all, yeah, B. I mean, anything that exists is just an object of awareness. There's no deeper level of existence than being an object of awareness, right? So, but how do you know you're not dreaming now? That we're not having a Zoom, a Zoom meeting in your dream, for example. How do you know that? Because if you're dreaming, I don't know what you're dreaming. If you type out your question in the chat box in your dream, nobody else will know except you. But here you've typed out your chat box, your chat question, your question in the chat, and Fariza is aware, and I'm aware, and other people are aware. So that you're not dreaming because other people are aware of that as well. So how do you know that you're aware? How do I know I'm aware of the underlying mind, and how exactly to do that? Well, the real trick is, how do we know that we're focusing on the underlying kind of nature of our mind versus just the adventitious perceptions that arise and pass away, right? That's the real question. So the way you know that is if you're focusing on some kind of qualities or characteristics of your mind that is present, both, that is present through time. That you can see that no matter what thoughts or feelings or perceptions arise, you're focusing on aspects of your mind that are the same through all those experiences, right? Like just the fact that the mind is aware of something. So rather than focusing on what I'm aware of, like what I see or what I hear or what I feel or what I think, those things all change. In one moment I'm hearing one thing, in another moment I'm feeling another thing, in another moment I'm thinking something else. So when we're focusing on what we're aware of, then we're not focusing on the nature of the mind. Rather, when we're focusing on like the fact that I am aware, what it's like to be aware, the fact that the mind is aware of things and that things can appear to the mind, that thing, the fact of being aware, that doesn't change from moment to moment. We're aware of different things, but the fact of having awareness and the quality of that awareness, that it's clear, anything can appear to it in the next moment. That fact, when we focus on that fact, then, that the experience of that aspect of our awareness, then we know that we're focusing on the underlying mind, right? Yeah, but it's not something that's very easy, right? Just like anything, like making bread making chapatis the first time is not very easy, right? It's the simplest thing. You just mix water and flour and roll it out and put it on the tawang and you make a chapati. But if you've never done it before, it's not very easy, right? So it's the same. When have you ever sat down and just tried to focus on the nature of your mind? We haven't done it before. So it can seem a little difficult at first, but you try once and then try again and try again. and you get more and more confident about what you're doing, and it seems easier and more natural.
Yep. Okay, Legtsok, I think we're running out of time now. We're already 6:15.
True, we are, yeah.
Yeah, so for everyone, I mean, whatever questions you have, we can again address it on the next session. Our next session is on 13th of June. That is, we are doing it every Saturday, Sunday at 5 to 6, 1 hour. So then this will be a continuation of that. So please do join us for that. And so then we can again have a Q&A and discuss more. And so we'll see you on 13th June. Now, I'm not sure how you got these details, because how do I share with you the Zoom? Maybe we'll be using the same Zoom ID, but how do I share it with you? So how will you all know? You can visit our Facebook page, which is Narik Gatsil link. Okay, you can do that, and then we will be sharing the Zoom details for the next session. Or you can write us an email at nglcenter@gmail.com, which I've just shared on the on the chat. So you can write a mail and we can share with you the Zoom details. Okay, is it okay? Yeah, so either through Facebook or you write us an email and then we share with you the Zoom details. Same way, it's very easy to join. And so we'll see you probably on 13 June, right, Legtsok, at 5
Yes.
o'clock.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Legtsok. It was so wonderful. Really had a good session. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Take care, Legtsok. Take care. Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
We'll see you again next
We'll see you
Saturday.
again. Yes, sure. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.